Abraham Bolden, and I'm from East St. Louis and proud of it. When I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, I was born at home, 106 North 11th Street in East St. Louis on January 1935. And it's the only appointment that I've kept since then. But anyway, when I was growing up in East St. Louis, such a wonderful place. A trying time. The riots had just occurred in East St. Louis in 1927 up to 1930. They had some terrible riots there. So that was a lot of racial tension. But growing up there, we didn't notice it, but we did notice things like there were separate high schools. We had East Side High School and we had Lincoln High School. And they were getting a much better education at the other high schools. But what concerned me more than anything else was how we treated one another. I was very sensitive to that, and I always wondered why. You know, we lived about 2 blocks from St. Mary's Hospital. And I used to lie in bed on Saturday night, and I would hear the ambulance as it would roll by the house, carrying somebody who had been cut, shot, or stabbed. And I wanted to make it an objective in my life to do something about that. And I was at a young age, less than 12 years old. A heart-wrenching experience that I experienced one day when I saw one brother kill another brother. Little Ed was killed by Big John over a checker game. Big John accused Little Ed of cheating. Little Ed pulled out a knife, slashed Big John. Big John pulled out a gun and shot Little Ed 6 times. And that scene followed me because after I became so literate where I could read the Bible, it reminded me of the time that Moses saw a Hebrew fighting an Egyptian. It made such an impression on him, it changed his whole life. It woke him up. And this incident between Big John and Little Ed changed my life, so I set out. And fortunately, I grew up at a time where teachers were teachers. In District 189, I remember Maggie Freeman, the history teacher, Miss Fiddler, the French teacher, Mr. Gladden, Mr. Wooden, and they loved their students. They were like family, and they treated you like family, so to speak. They were very interested in your progress. And that's what I recall mostly about East St. Louis was the instructors there and how they cultivated you and how they loved and how warm that they were. They came by your house. Sometimes you would walk in the house and you would see a teacher sitting there having a chicken leg with your parents. But oh, don't foul up though, because that same teacher would come to your house. And at that particular time, if a teacher came to your house for your misconduct, you had no defense. The teacher was telling the truth at all times. And I remember Mr. Beefmore, I remember Mr. Gladden, as I said, Mr. Wooden. Now my father was a great man. I worshiped my father. I looked up to him. He held 2 8-hour jobs for a packing company and the Louisville Railroad. He was a stockman at Louisville Railroad. It's still there, passing through East St. Louis, the B&O Railroad. He was a hard worker, and he was a hard man. When I say hard, I meant there was only one man in the house, and that was him. He gave an order, you either obeyed the order, you found somewhere else to stay. I know I used to threaten to run away a lot of times. I'm gonna run away from it. I'm gonna run off. And Mama said, let me pack a lunch. You're gonna need a lunch. Well, I'd stay gone until dinner time. I'd turn around and come back. You know, it was just so much fun there. And my friends, they were such an assortment. Even though we were segregated, so far as the living area is concerned, I had quite a few white friends too. We played baseball together. I remember a guy named Sprague, and I remember Kenny. And these were good friends of mine. I took up for Kenny one time. Some of my other friends jumped on him. I think they just didn't like it. I fought with Kenny, and they weren't surprised because they knew my thoughts about things like that. I seemed to have that East St. Louis spirit of being close and loving everybody. That was the spirit of East St. Louis, especially Lincoln High School at that time. When we went to school, we felt like we were going home. Yeah, we felt right at home. Mr. Buchanan, the band director, he was a teacher and mentor to the children who were in the band. That's where I met Miles Davis. He was in the band. And he became a great man. And he became an icon in the music world. And we have such outstanding people like Wilma Rudolph, and we also had Jackie Joyner. We also had Henry Nicholson. I don't know if you remember Reverend Henry Nicholson. He became a major preacher in East St. Louis. These were friends of mine. Reginald Petty was also a friend. I think Reggie and I graduated together. We were always good friends. And not only that, after many of us graduated from East St. Louis Lincoln High School, we went to Lincoln University and continued the association. And I'm just proud to be from District 189 because, as I say, it was an exercise of real love, real caring for each other. We had a spirit of family. And Boldens were a great musical family. At the age of 9 years old, you had to take piano lessons whether you wanted to or not, because my father and mother taught us that taking piano lessons taught you discipline. How many siblings I had? 3 sisters, 2 brothers. My oldest brother, Daniel Sr., moved to North Chicago when he was about 18 years old, went in the business up in North Chicago, Illinois. He died a millionaire. He went into the liquor store business. Married Willa Perrell, Rush, also from East St. Louis. That's another thing, East St. Louisans married people from East St. Louis. All right, I had a brother, Benjamin. He was a master musician. He was giving concerts at 17 years old on the piano. Then Cecilia, my sister, she had perfect pitch. Ezra, my sister, and then Feda Buck is the only one I'm living today, who was my last sister. Now, for many years, for almost 20 years, there was a Bolden accompanying the choir at Lincoln High School. They were the accompanying pianists for over 20 years. There was my sister, my brother, each did 4 years. Then I came along playing the trumpet. I became real good. They used to call me Little Satch. I loved Dixieland. I had a chance to play on what they call the Admiral Riverboat, too. I was doing that, I was only about 16 years old. They called me Little Satch. Played on the radio a couple of times. Fed as I said, she's retired now from the Internal Revenue Service. She did almost 40 years with the Internal Revenue Service. She's still alive. But as I said, my oldest sister, Cecilia, she passed away. And Esme passed away. I miss them dearly. I have the pictures over there. We were just, you know what really some memories I had is like when my father would get a day off, which was very seldom. We would go to Lincoln, we'd go to Forest Park Zoo. And just getting the food together, Mom would get absurd and she'd mashed potatoes, fried chicken. And we'd be getting ready to go to Forest Park Zoo. And we didn't have a car at the time. Each one of us had a bag to carry. And we would go there and look at the animals. That was our out, and that was our real fun. And that's where we really enjoyed ourselves. You know, just small things that people take for granted. Those were big things back in that time. To go to a zoo and to spread that blanket out. And not only that, then you would see some of your professors over there sitting on a blanket. You would see different neighbors there. You know, it's kind of unusual. Now, contrary to that, I didn't see any of that when we moved to Chicago. Chicago, to me, was the coldest place in the world. When I came to Chicago on October 30th of 1960, to be sworn in with the Secret Service, I thought Chicago was the worst city. And I still think that, even though I've been here since 1960. It was cold. You know, the one thing that I noticed right away when I came to Chicago, in East St. Louis, people would be going to work early in the morning. East St. Louis had a wonderful bus system. Men had the lunch buckets and everything. When the bus would stop, the men would step back, the women got on the bus, the men got on last and had a seat. Here in Chicago, I was at 63rd and Cottage Grove, catching the L train to go downtown to my job the second day that I was here in the Secret Service. The train pulled up. It was so many people was standing on the platform, I got scared. I mean, Chicago was just so big and out of order. So far as I was concerned, when that L train pulled up and the doors open, the men started pushing the women down and elbowing them and everything. I said, these are heathens up here. I mean, I'm in Heathensville around here. I had 2 scholarships when I graduated from high school, one to Milton University and another one to Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. I chose Lincoln University because it was a black school, and I felt that I'd be more comfortable around my people. So when I graduated from Lincoln University with a Bachelor of Music degree, and that's the reason I majored in music, is because that's where my scholarship was. I really wanted to be a minister or lawyer. Let me go back. Before I came to Chicago, I had a job after in 1956, I graduated from Lincoln University, cum laude, third in a class of 95. I had a job waiting for me in Mayfield, Kentucky, teaching band. My wife was looking in the newspaper and she said, Abraham, she says, you know, I know that you've been talking about going into police work. She said, Pinkerton is hiring detectives. They're hiring private detectives. I said, Pinkerton? National detective? I said, they ain't gonna hire nobody, Negro. You know, she says, well, why don't you go find out? So she clipped the little advertisement, help on the advertisement out of the paper. And I walked into the little office and the little secretary was sitting there. So she looks up at me. She's a young European lady. She looked up at me and said, yes. I said, I'm here to apply for the job. She says, we don't have a job open. And I said, yes, you do. So I reached in my lapel pocket and I showed her the paper that my wife had given me. And she said, we're not hiring people like you. Mr. Mertz, who was the district director of Pinkerton National Detective Agency for Illinois, Detroit, Kentucky, and just the whole district, he happened to be surveying the St. Louis office, and he heard the conversation. So Mr. Mertz walked out of the office and said, what's the problem out here? Secretary told him, said, well, he wanted to file an application, but I told him we didn't have anything open. He said, yes, we do. Give him an application. Fill out the application. As soon as you fill it out, send him in to see me. I went in and talked to Mr. Mertz. Mr. Mertz said, you're going to be the first Negro private detective that Pinkerton ever hired. And he gave me that start into police work that I'd been looking for all my life. Now, I worked for Pinkerton. They trained me. Pinkerton trained very good. Handwriting, photography, and different things like that. They sent me to internal school I stayed there for about 4 months. After I was with Pinkerton for a year, the wife happened to be reading the paper again. She says, Abraham, the state police are hiring troopers. And I said, no, I like the job I'm on. She said, no, you should apply. I said, why? She said, it's going to be more than just you and I. And I don't think we can make it on what you're making now. So I went to Springfield and applied for the Illinois State Police. Became a trooper in 1957. And they transferred me to Peoria, Illinois, where I was the first black trooper ever in District 8 in Peoria, Illinois. They used to call me Smokey. They see me riding around, you know, wear that big hat, you know, like Smokey the Bear. And they would stand on the side, they see me in the state police car out and hey, Smokey, when I was in Peoria, Illinois. There was a young man from Massachusetts who was running for president. He was coming to Peoria, Illinois on a campaign address. Oh, here I am, a state policeman now. I was on a traffic detail, and this was in 1959. He came through Peoria to speak at the Peoria Courthouse on Main Street, near Superior Avenue in Chicago. In Peoria. And this young man was John F. Kennedy. So I was stationed at the Peoria Airport. So when the convoy came in, when the plane landed, and the convoy came in, I was standing right outside of Peoria Airport to stop the traffic so the convoy could make a turn. But I knew that this young man who I had seen on television so many times talking about what he was going to do for everybody, not just black people. And he impressed me so much that he was talking from his heart. This wasn't just politics. This was a man who believed what he was saying. Secret Service agent happened to be in Peoria, Illinois, and they assigned me because I was one of the most intelligent troopers that they had. Most of the troopers in those southern cities, like Peoria, those little small cities, the Negro population was very small. If you had an outstanding job, you were looked on pretty high. State police was really a high-class job back then in the 50s. And so now, when the special agent in charge, Fred Baxter was his name, he came to Peoria, he was working on some counterfeiting check cases, and we had a conversation. I said, Mr. Baxter, do they have any Negro Secret Service agents? Mr. Baxter told me, I don't know, but why don't you make an application? I said, yes, sir. So I went to Springfield, made out an application, was accepted into the Secret Service, and was to report for duty on October 30th here in Chicago, Illinois, October 30th of 1960. So I moved my wife to Chicago. She was very happy. She was very happy. She'd been wanting to get to Chicago all her life. And like I said, this city here has been hell for me from the first day on, but she loved Chicago. The only thing I liked here was the Chicago Cubs. Here I am, a Secret Service agent. And I didn't know it at the time, but the first black Secret Service agent period. So in Chicago, it was sort of prejudiced, big city. I wasn't very well accepted here in Chicago, Secret Service. In the first place, it was so segregated, there was only a few places that I could live. So now, the Secret Service was very prejudiced. They would tell off-colored jokes around me until they found out that I didn't play that stuff. I don't know where you people been, but don't bring that stuff to me. I had my supervisor say, I don't want to embarrass anybody in here, but I know this joke about this Negro. He was down in, I said, wait a minute, sir, just a minute. You just said you didn't want to embarrass anybody. So why would you continue to tell a joke that might embarrass me? Or you too thin-skinned? I'm just giving you the atmosphere that was there. If you held up for yourself, they call you thin-skinned, And in the meantime, the whole country was going through some of the worst civil rights strife that the world has ever known. Black people were being lynched. We had white people lynched. We had people who were just riding in the streets in Chicago here. They ride a block from me. As a matter of fact, 2 people got killed that lived down the street from me in the ride. Now, Kennedy was coming to Chicago to thank Mayor Daley for getting out the vote and putting him over as president of the United States. The Secret Service office had the authority to assign a protection for President Kennedy. Now, the president brings his own detail, but wherever city he goes in, they have to also pitch in and help protect the president. Normally, the agents who are in the city where the president's going, they get choice position at the banquet table and things like that. Well, they did in this case, all except my case. When it came to my assignment, they moved the Chicago police from in front of a washroom in McCormick Place and put me there. It was very difficult for me to stop rich white folk from using the washroom, and I'm standing there in plain clothes. I'm a black man, and I'm telling people who had donated thousands of dollars to the Kennedy campaign that they couldn't use that washroom. You see where that put me? But anyway, I did my job. I wouldn't let them use the watch. I searched it, I shut it down. But that's what the Secret Service did. They put the Chicago policeman in my position upstairs near the president. So here I am standing in front of the washroom, twiddling my thumbs, and at 8:30 p.m., April 28, 1961, I heard the motorcade come up and stop in front of McCormick Place. It was the president's motorcade. So, oh my goodness, I sure wish I could see the president. Here I am, a level down in front of a washroom, and I'm trying to look up the steps. Maybe I could see his patent leather shoe or something, and tell my wife about that, my grandchildren. But as fate would have it, when the motorcade stopped, the first thing the president wanted to do was use the washroom, and there I stood. Isn't that something? Now, I call that fate. The president came down the steps with every Democratic dignitary within miles of Chicago, Adlai Stevenson and George Don, Congressman Dawson. Everybody was with the president. There was anybody that was a Democrat around in Chicago. And the president came down the steps. There I stood. And he stopped in front of me. So I kind of stepped to the side. I thought, you know, I was a big guy then. Thought maybe I might be blocking the door or something. So I kind of stepped to the side. The president stepped to the side too. And he looked me in the eye and he smiled. He said, "Are you a Secret Service agent or are you one of Mayor Daley's finest?" I said, "I'm a Secret Service agent, Mr. President." The president asked me, after he found out my name was Bolden, he called me Mr. Bolden. From then on, from that day forward, the president called me Mr. Bolden. Now he says, "Mr. Bolden," he said, "has there ever been a Secret Service agent assigned to the White House detail?" I said, "Not to my knowledge, Mr. President." President Kennedy asked me, he said, "Would you like to be the first?" I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. President." He said, "I'll be looking forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C. Now, you can't beat that with a stick. Here they had taken all of this time moved me from my position upstairs, put me in front of a toilet, and the president found me. And we had that conversation that brought all of this about. History. I'm down in history now. I'm in United States history. Not just East St. Louis history, world history. The Secret Service didn't like it either. Because on June the 6th of 1961, I flew to Washington, D.C. under the orders of the President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, and I made that long walk to those White House doors. Grabbed one of the doors, pulled it open, and walked into history. Walked into this. But you know, my supervisor, Harvey Henderson, he didn't like me. He didn't like black folk. He was from Mississippi. And if you were black, get back. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. So we're in Massachusetts at the Kennedy compound. Let me tell you the type of man Kennedy was. After I arrived at Hannahsport, Massachusetts, they had a pickup football game in front of the Kennedy compound. Kennedy's owned everything there in Hannahsport that I could see with the naked eye, except the ocean. They own all the beaches and all up and down there. It was Robert Kennedy's house, John Kennedy's house, and there was some other Kennedys that people never even met. They had houses there. And when I say house, I mean big houses. There were some mansions. All right. The kids were playing pickup football, and they young kids, you know. Kennedy called them all together, called me. I went over there. He told the kids, he said, "You're gonna see Mr. Bolden walking back and forth. He is a U.S. Secret Service agent. This is Mr. Bolden. If you address him, this is Mr. Bolden." See, he told. He didn't want no stuff. So now, we at the compound, my supervisor. We had just come back from a yacht ride. Supervisor was keeping me off the yacht. He wouldn't put me on the yacht. He put me on what they call a follow-up boat. Now this follow-up boat is something. This follow-up boat's got 2 Thunderbird engines in there. The thing be going about 40, 50 miles an hour. It gets way ahead of the yacht, got a big siren on it that almost deaf you when you hear it. And it's telling all the other boats out there in the Atlantic, stay back. It's the president's yacht. Well, they put me on the yacht. On the follow boat twice, 2 days in a row. That's a hell of an assignment. Because when that boat turns like this, the water comes. You know, it's just going so fast, the water just come over the side. And I would see those agents. Periodically, they would move from one side of the boat to another because they knew the routine. I didn't know the routine. So here, I'm holding on for dear life, holding on to the rail on the side of the boat because nobody knew that I couldn't swim. But I never told anybody I couldn't swim. Here I am with the president, and I'm just thinking, you know, how it would look if on the headlines it said, "President saves Secret Service agent from drowning." I'm getting ready to go on a follow-up boat on July the 3rd, 1961. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning to get my assignment on a follow-up boat. The president comes out on the deck of the yacht. He calls my supervisor over there. The supervisor comes to me, all mad. This guy was so mad he could have drank a bowl of razor blade. Bolden, you're on the yacht today. Yeah, the president noticed that. Look, I'm just one vote. I'm one vote. This wasn't a political thing with him. The man felt me. He was looking, he was watching how they treated me. And so Harvey Henderson had resisted. He said, well, Mr. President, Bolden's assigned to the follow-up boat. President said, change your assignment. That's what, simple as that, change your assignment. So here I am, I'm sitting on the yacht. That's good enough for me. On the back of the yacht, we cruising along, you know, I'm enjoying myself. In that light gray chair on the Marlin was the name of the yacht. And I'm sitting in a big chair. And all of a sudden this sailor comes out dressed in white. And he's carrying this platter with him. And on this platter, he's got these silver utensils, bowls and stuff like that. So he comes over and I'm sitting there in this big chair. This chair was hugging me too. I was enjoying myself, sitting in the sun. The sailor reached down, he pressed some kind of button and whoops, came up a tray light. Came up right in front of me. He set the tray that he was carrying on top of that and said, the president would like for you to have lunch. Lord have mercy. President John F. Kennedy would like for you to have lunch. Clam chowder soup, a Coca-Cola. I'm telling you, I was in heaven. I couldn't believe it. Here the president of the United States sending me lunch. So I sat down there and I've loved clam chowder soup ever since then because it reminded me of that day. But when we got back to the little compartment where we were living, my supervisor had just seen me and Bobby Kennedy and the president talking together after the yacht ride. President Bobby Kennedy came to greet us when we got off the yacht. The president called me over and said, have you met my brother Bobby? And we had a short conversation. Bobby Kennedy wanted to know, why didn't you come here to the FBI? We're always looking for minorities. And the president asked me, he said, Mr. Bolden, he said, do you plan to make a career out of the Secret Service? I said, no, Mr. President. I said, I would like to become a diplomat to one of the African countries. Diplomat, representative. President says, well, I'll be around for a few more years. He said, you learn to speak an African dialect, any language. I'll see that you meet your goal. Now, he had already promised me to make me the first African-American Secret Service. So I had every belief that he would follow through. If he got reelected again, I would have been a diplomat to African country. My southern supervisor, he's standing there looking at us, had this conversation. Well, we talked about Dr. Martin Luther King and some other things that I can't go into right now. He's standing back. So when we get back to the hotel, he's sitting there drinking his beer. He said, Bolden. I said, what, Hart? He said, I'm going to tell you something, don't you ever forget it. And he slid to the edge of the couch that he was sitting on to make sure that he emphasized it when he told me. He said, you a nigger? You were born a nigger, you're gonna die a nigger, and you'll never be anything else but a nigger, so act like one. That's what he wanted me to exchange shots with him. That's what he wanted. That was a bait. I looked at him, I said, I love you too, Harvey. Now fight that. I was smart. But they had something else for me. Said, you're smart. So now when I got back to Chicago, before I got back to Chicago, I went to Washington, D.C., and it was on July the 5th of 1961. I went straight to the chief of the Secret Service office, and I complained. I said, the president's life is in danger. He said, why? I said, because the Secret Service, they drink too much, they don't care about the job, they hate President Kennedy. If anything happens, they're not going to react. Chief Huey Bauman said, that's a serious charge. So I know the president's life is in danger. And I want to be transferred back to Chicago because when it happened, I still complained when the inspector would come from Washington, D.C. to Chicago. That was my major complaint, was that Kennedy needed better protection or he would be assassinated. But you know what they did? They set me up. They got 2 counterfeiters that I had arrested and had these 2 counterfeiters to say that I used one of them to try to solicit a bribe from the other one. Now these are guys waiting on trial. One guy arrested along with 11 other guys. He was the head of a ring, Frank Jones, counterfeiting. Joe Spagnoli, Italian, who supported Frank Jones in his criminal activity. These were 2 witnesses that they got. Now, I was in Washington, D.C. This was on May 17, 1964. They came to me and said, Bolden, we need you back in Chicago. We just got a counterfeiting plant, solved a counterfeiting plant. We need you to go undercover. And I knew better than that. But anyway, they checked me out of the Willard Hotel. That's where I was living at that time in Washington, D.C. Took me to Dulles Airport. Got on the American Airlines, they flew me back to Chicago. Wouldn't let me talk to anybody. First thing I knew that anything's up, I'm sitting in the office, the U.S. Attorney's office. Ed Hanrahan walks in with my supervisor. My supervisor, Martineau, says, we're going to charge you with soliciting a bribe. I said, that's ridiculous. Who said so? And then they tell me. So that's ridiculous. On May the 21st, they took a case before the grand jury. They indicted me. May the 21st, 1964. So I had to stand trial. I went to trial July the 6th. So in 1964, after the testimony was in, the judge called a jury out from deliberation. Get this now. Called a jury out, all 12 of the jurors, and said, in my opinion, the evidence supports a verdict of guilty. Now go back in and deliberate. The judge did that. And I'm suing the government soon for $30 million for breach of not only my human rights, civil rights, but human rights too. We'll be filing that, Crump and I are going to be filing that suit pretty soon. Because after the judge did that, we asked for another judge. No. He heard a second trial. The second trial, during the deliberation of the jury, he put me and my attorney out of the courtroom. He put everybody out of the building except him, the U.S. Attorney's Office, his hand in hand. He put everybody, clean the building out except government employees. And the jury found me guilty. Make a long story short, the judge sentenced me to 6 years in penitentiary. So now they start me out at Terre Haute. Now I know what these people want to do, because I have read on what some other people who had been in my position and so-called squealed from the inside. They tried to declare me insane. That's what the government did. And so I prepared for that. When they sent me to Terre Haute, I knew that they were going to work me either into St. Elizabeth or Springfield, one of the two. Those were where the government sent dissidents and had them declared insane. So he sent me to Terre Haute first, and they transferred me to Fort Leavenworth, which is the top prison in the United States. But I knew I wouldn't be at Fort Leavenworth long, because I knew they were going to send me to Springfield, and they did. But I was one step ahead. I'd already hired an attorney in Springfield because I knew. And I also had a code worked out with my wife. I said, honey, I'll write you a letter. And any I in that letter is dotted with a circle. Don't believe anything the letter says. You get your butt down there and see what's going on. July the 6th, 1967, I was in Springfield. 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 guards came to my bunk. They tapped me on the bottom of the feet, said, come on, go with us. Now, when you're in a penitentiary like that, you don't have any choice. So I got up off my bunk and I started following. And we came to this place they call 2-1 East. You can smell it before you get there. It's a whole wing of the prison. That's where the Birdman, Alcatraz were. That's where they put people who murdered sheriffs and deputies and psychopaths. So we come up to this big steel door. And I could hear the muffled screams coming from the other side of that door. They walked me in there, made me strip of all of my clothes, stripped down, looked all up my butt. And all the time I'm complaining, I don't belong here. What's this all about? You don't answer no question. He put me in a strip room, naked as a jaybird. I feared for my life. I didn't know if I was going to be able to go through it. They kept me in there. Guys were individual rooms with a little window. That's all you had, was a little window to see. You could look out in the hallway. You could hear screams all night. People were screaming. Screaming vulgarities all night, throwing shit up against the window. Actually, in their hand, sling it up against the window. and there were beards that long, hadn't had a shave. Some of them were in the room where the only place they had to urinate and defecate was a hole in the floor. At least I had a toilet and a bunk. I woke up, the bells were going off. Ding, 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 ding. I knew I had to get out of there. I heard one guard tell another one, say, cell 8 is burning inside. The other guard shouted out and said, there's nobody in cell 8. He said, well, the whole room's on fire. Get Bolden out of 7. That's what they, so they had to let me out. At my wit's end. So now I'm asleep one night on my bunk, and then a light comes into the cell. I look at this, it's much brighter. That light ain't nothing according to the light I saw. And it started going. Then I didn't see anything moving except that light. Then an image came within the light. No mouths were moving or anything. And I couldn't move. I'm just laying there. I'm trying to wonder what's going on. Because they had forced me to take 175 milligrams of Elevir, which is a mind-altering drug. See, they were heading me to Thorazine. Thorazine is such a powerful mental drug that you have to think to breathe. Once they get that Thorazine in your system, you sitting up here, you won't even breathe unless you say breathe. You have to think to breathe. And that's what they wanted to put me on. Because I knew the routine. But then this voice came, transmuted to my inner self. It says, what is your name? I said, Abraham. It asked me, it said, how many children do you have? I said, 3. That voice told me, don't worry, God is with you. Then the light died away. Yep. Then I heard footsteps outside my door. Guards had ran up the step, and they had them big 5-share, 5-battery flashlights. They were shining them all around my room through that little glass. They heard something too. So I knew I wasn't going nuts. Because they had run up there, they had seen a light, or heard something, because they didn't go to nobody's cell, they ran direct to my cell, shine that light all around the room. Then they went back downstairs. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but they were mumbling to each other. You see. Now, they had it all set up. On August the 3rd, now this was July the 6th. August the 3rd, one of my spies who were working in the prison, an officer, there was Officer Sweet. He said, they got you scheduled to go before the review board. They want to change your status. The only person who could assign, change my status was the chief of classification and parole. His name was Stevens Nicholson. He hated me. He told me, and he was a brother too, it's a black man. You couldn't tell it, but I mean, he was mixed. And he wanted to elevate the white side, but I used to call him brother, and he didn't like that. He was chief of classification and parole. He is the only person who can sign a change a classification in the institution. That's chief of because he works directly out of Washington, D.C. So Washington, D.C. had said, sign the papers to change this man's classification from inmate to psychiatric hospital. Once that they did that, then your time stops. You're no longer doing time. You're there for mental treatment. I could be there now for mental treatment. At 88 years old, the only person who could let you out under those circumstances, if he had signed that paper, would be a judge. They would have to declare me sane enough to finish my time. They're sane enough now to finish your time, not to be released. This is what the government did to me. The Wednesday before the Friday, you're supposed to sign that paper. And in this paper, this light came again. Died away. No words this time. But after it left, there was something going back and forth like the pendulum on the clock. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know. I was just as before. I thought, really, I could really be going insane. See all these lights and stuff. Supposed to go before the committee. August the 3rd, 9 a.m. I was supposed to be the first one. Had the vision on Wednesday, Thursday, August the 2nd. Stephen Nicholson shot his wife in the leg, chased her down the street, shot up in another guard's house, ran back home, threw a rope across the pipes, his furnace pipes in the basement, put the other end around his neck, stood on an orange crate, jumped off and committed suicide. And he the one wanted to sign the papers for me being crazy. So people wonder, say, that guy, he really convinced of God. Yeah, I'm convinced. I'm convinced. So, well, what religion are you? I don't know. I follow Islam. I'm a little Christian. I'm a little Jew. I'm a little everybody. I'm of all, the all. And I'm so disappointed in my people. After all of the marching, all of the crying, all of the dying, we don't have anything to show for it. That is the thing that bothers me most now in my old age, is that we have the best basketball players God ever sent to the world. We sell other people's tennis shoes for $200 to $500 a pair, but we don't make a shoestring. And that's what bothers me. Everybody's living off of us, and we sitting back like a slave. We're still in slavery. We're worse than slavery because the slave was trying to get free. We think that we're free. But we're worse off than the slave because we don't want to be. We're asking for civil rights and don't have human rights. We begging for what people die for. And that's to be treated like a human being. We have to change, stop marching and start thinking. We have to think our way out. I didn't say kill nobody, because everybody here is already dead. Can't kill a dead man. I'm not for war. I'm for thinking, because I feel like this. God made everybody. There's a place, a purpose for everybody. It's a time and a purpose for everything under the heaven, as it says in Ezekiel. I think East St. Louis, and I see it, is going to be one of the major cities of civilization, of a newborn civilization. Because East St. Louis now is seen like the vein, it's just like Gary, Indiana. Sweet water, clear water, good water, always drains low. It's going to drain. There ain't no good water on the mountain top. This is melt. But the sweet, good water going low. And we have the talent. We have the inspiration that's going to come from the south, from cities like East St. Louis, Mayfield, Kentucky, Shrookelock, Mississippi. Those small towns like that is where the truth will flourish. They're going to save the whole world. Now, this book, as it says on the back, it is an analysis of the problems of alleged inferiority of the black man in America. And it's by a former United States Secret Service agent and New Age author Abraham W. Bolden Sr. Now this book, if people read this book, we can bring a unity that the world has never seen, because we're special people gathered here together. And if you read this book and come to understanding of this is the answer here. We can march until our feet wear down to the bone, but you're going to have to come here. And I've had confidence in that. I have confidence. This book, it doesn't talk about the Bible. It talks about the mind, the logic, wisdom of the mind. And I don't care if you're Christian, Jew, or whatever you are. This is the truth that God wants the people to know. Please get this book, and if anybody wants the book and can't afford it, just write, and I'll buy a copy. Because this is the answer here. No question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So y'all, I appreciate you coming here and wasting your film on me. I hope I said something that's going to inspire somebody someday. And I'm just glad to be able to contribute. People say, well, they messed up your life. No, didn't nobody mess up my life. This was my life. This is my life. Suffering was my life. Huh? Because God says in Isaiah, I have refined thee, but not with silver. I have chosen thee out of the furnace of affliction. Huh? That's where you get chosen from. You don't buy a dress without trying it on, would you? See if it's fit. Because if you look at my writings on Facebook and the books that I've done, you'll see. You will see the evidence of a living God. I'm not talking about a God that's coming. I'm talking about that's here now, doing his work. And the wise shall prevail. There's no question about it.